Welcome to Doing the Work, a Naples Integrated Recovery podcast. My name is Brian, and this space is for anyone who's tired of surviving the same emotional and behavioral loops, whether that's anxiety, trauma, addiction, or problems in your relationships. Around here, we cut the surface level advice and sugarcoating, no platitudes or bumper sticker wisdom. We focus on clarity, responsibility, emotional discipline, and the courage to look at yourself honestly so that you can stop repeating old patterns and start living with intention instead of reaction. Let's get into it. I want to start today with a simple story. On the surface, almost sounds kind of dismissive, but stay with it. It tells the truth about how suffering works. A group of monks had finished eating together and noticed a farmer frantically running toward them. He is visibly distressed, and he asks if they have seen his cows. All of them are gone. On top of this, all of his crops were destroyed by insects. He says that he doesn't know how he could possibly survive so much misfortune all at the same time. The monks look at him and tell him that they haven't seen the cows. Maybe they went in a different direction. So the farmer runs off frantically to keep searching. And after he leaves, Buddha turns to the monks and says, "Do you know why you are the happiest people on earth? Because you have no cows to lose." That's it. That's the entire story. And the first time I heard that, I did not think that sounded very comforting. But when I sat with it, I realized it wasn't about minimizing the farmer's pain. It was about pointing to the source of his suffering. It made me think about a part of my story that for years I carried so much shame about, but now you've probably heard me mention weekly. It's just part of my journey. I didn't lose cows. I lost something that I think arguably was a lot harder to replace. I went from being a respected police supervisor to being jobless in like 2 weeks. Publicly humiliated, dragged through an internal affairs investigation that I was triangled into, named in a lawsuit with absolutely no control, paper cut to death by a new chief who was aggressively trying to force me out the door, judged by people who did not know me, and no ability to defend myself in any of it. My entire identity had collapsed nearly overnight. And probably like many people would if they were put in a situation like that, I was angry at everybody. I was angry at the chief. I was angry at the department. I was angry at the reporter, the family involved in the lawsuit, my former boss for pulling me into the situation. I found myself replaying and rehearsing conversations endlessly in my head, arguing with ghosts, building cases in my head that would never be heard. Then, after I got fired, I finally had an opportunity to kind of share my side, and I was hoping to have some clarity to maybe restore my name at least a little bit. But this reporter also was not looking for any truth, just kind of looking more for a, "Aren't you sorry that you did it? Don't you wish you had done it differently?" And he wasn't interested in publishing an article anymore once I said that all I wanted was peace for that family and to move on with my life. And then there was a practical reality. After this, I applied to everything. I am talking about absolutely every job you can imagine. Numerous times I was told that I was overqualified, or jobs I didn't want, jobs I never imagined ever in my life applying for. I didn't think any of the work was beneath me, and no one called me back. And I learned very quickly that I had every law enforcement qualification under the sun and almost no life experience outside of that system. And that was devastating. This is where this parable stopped being theoretical. Not only were my cows gone, the whole map was gone. The uniform, authority, structure, respect, my sense of usefulness, all of it had vanished. And that is where some suffering really set in, not because I had lost a job, but because I had lost the story of who I even was. There's a distinction that matters here. Pain is unavoidable. I talk about that all the time. Suffering is what happens when we refuse to accept what's already true. I've talked about the concept of the second arrow. The first arrow was the loss itself. The second arrow is the fight with reality and the story we tell ourselves. And for a while, I was really deep in that second arrow. I was bitter. I was resentful. I was replaying this injustice over and over. I just wanted someone to understand me. I wanted somebody to admit wrongdoing or to fix it or to give me my cows back. My dad was not a very emotional person. And when he watched all of that play out in real time, I think that may have been one of the only times in my life I had ever seen my dad cry, because he saw the entire situation and he felt so bad that the carpet had been ripped out from underneath me and was totally unfair and unrealistic, and that there was no justice coming. None at all. And my cows didn't come back. But eventually, something shifted, not because my life got easier, but because there was nowhere else to run. And there's a moment that comes after a real loss when you realize this isn't temporary, this isn't a misunderstanding, nothing is going to be corrected. That is a truly brutal moment, but also where you can have some clarity. Because once that line is crossed, resistance stops working, and that's where rebuilding can begin. At that lowest point, I had nothing left to protect. No title, no status, no narrative control, no certainty about my future. One very burning, clear thing, that relapse was not an option. All of this happened when I was like between 30 and 60 days sober. Not because I felt strong or enlightened, but because I knew where that road went. I had been there so much time. So trying to escape from all of this pain was completely off the table, which meant only one option left: adaptation. And that wasn't spirituality, it was really survival. This is where non-attachment can show up in real life, not as a philosophy, but a forced reckoning. Non-attachment is not giving up voluntarily and then feeling peaceful about it. It is realizing when you were clinging to something that is already gone, and then deciding whether or not you are going to keep bleeding to death over it or trying to bandage and work with what's left. I didn't start letting go because I was ready. I let go because holding on was destroying me. And looking back on this, I can see that the deepest attachment wasn't to the job itself, it was to the identity. That law enforcement identity was who I was in the world, or how I was seen, or how I saw myself. And when it collapsed, it felt like annihilation. But here's the part that matters. Once the identity was gone, it stopped owning me, which created space. Tie it back to the farmer and the cows. All of us have cows. Some of them are obvious. Jobs, money, property. And others are less noticeable, like authority, reputation, being seen as competent or the good one, or being respected. And if those things are threatened, the suffering can be immense. Not because any of those things are bad to have, but because we confuse them with who we are. When your identity and role fuses, it feels personal. There's also something transformative that can happen when you truly hit bottom and don't have an escape hatch. You stop pretending, you stop negotiating, you stop bargaining with reality, and in that bottom space, that's where rebuilding becomes possible. One step at a time. It's not anything heroic or inspiring. Well, some people may find it inspiring. But where you start to learn skills that you never thought that you would need, and you allow yourself to be a beginner again. You let go of all that you were supposed to be. My ego hated the thought of me with this like detective and supervisor identity starting all over. And this is why the cow story is not saying get rid of everything and then you'll be happy. That is not realistic. This teaching is simpler and harder. Don't let what you have become the thing that owns you. Because when it goes, and eventually it always does, then the less fused your identity is to it and the less you suffer. Eventually, all of us are going to face a moment where the cows disappear. It may be your job. It may be your health. It might be your reputation or a relationship. If you've got addictions, it could be all those things all at the same time. And the question is not whether that moment comes. The question is whether you have practiced letting go before reality forces it on you. And non-attachment is not the same as detachment. Detachment is kind of rigid, defensive, and certain, but non-attachment is flexible. It says, this makes sense right now, and if it changes, I'm going to adapt. That is the kind of flexibility that allowed me to rebuild. Not without pain, not without grief, because there was certainly grief in the loss of that old identity, but without being destroyed by what happened. So if you are listening to this and there's something in your world that feels upside down, or if you have lost something or someone that once defined you, know this: you're not broken or weak. You're certainly not alone. You may just be discovering who you are now without the cows and without the crops. And as strange as that sounds, that can actually become a place of real freedom. No cows doesn't mean no responsibility. It doesn't mean no effort, and it definitely does not mean no pain. It means no illusion of permanence. And when that illusion drops, then unnecessary suffering can drop with it. That is the purpose of this story. No cows, no unnecessary problems. Here's the hard part. You don't get to choose when the cows leave. No one does. Sometimes it's slow. It may be public and humiliating. It may be quiet and invisible. But sooner or later, something that you thought was stable isn't. And suffering doesn't come from the loss itself. It comes from how you had fused your identity to what disappeared. That's the part that's worth noticing. Not so you can let go today, not so that you can become detached, but so that you can see where you are gripping reality like it owes you permanence. Whatever you're afraid to lose right now, that's where your nervous system is already bracing. Non-attachment is not about philosophy. It's what happens when reality wins and then you stop fighting it. I'm not telling you that you need to drop anything on purpose. Life will handle that when it's ready. This is about you working on awareness, to notice the difference between who you are and what you're currently standing on. Because when the cows go, and eventually something always does, then you have not confused them with yourself and you'll suffer less when they're gone. That's not enlightenment, that's just adulthood and emotional maturity. And that is where freedom can start. That's doing the work. Thanks for spending the time with me. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with somebody who may need to hear it. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others around you. Remember that we're all doing the best that we can with the tools that we currently have, and we are all capable of growing past them. If you'd like to reach out or connect, send me an email, brian@naplesintegratedrecovery.com. I hope to hear from you there. And in the meantime, thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.